5 p.m. in Lagos, 6 p.m. in Johannesburg, and 7 p.m. in Nairobi, Kenya. Top of the evening to you, wherever you're watching us from on the continent of Africa. And thank you for tuning in to Report Desk Africa, coming to you live from our Lagos studios in southwest Nigeria. My name, as always, if you know and if you do not know, is Benard Akede.
And I am Adesewa Odusoga. It's a delight to have you join us wherever you're viewing this from on the African continent. I know you may be a little surprised that you're not saying blessings today, so I'm standing in for blessings. Welcome to the show. All right, our conversation for today's episode revolves around events in South Africa with issues ranging from a controversial gender neutrality draft by the Department of Basic Education proposing unisex toilets in public schools to victims of the apartheid era seeking reparations. All right, and that's where we'll begin our program from. And now, the Department of Basic Education has set the record straight on plans to introduce unisex toilets in South African public schools. Now, the department says it was not entirely true that it was proposing unisex toilets. Instead, the department is investigating relevant response mechanisms to ensure the constitutional obligations for sexual minorities, social and educational inclusion, while avoiding the currently overwhelming litigation. Now, the proposal came under heavy fire from political parties and civil society after the draft's policy was leaked. Now, our correspondent Niyi Omoni captured the reactions in this report.
A leaked draft report by the Department of Basic Education for an inclusive environment that would accommodate learners of different sexual orientations has come under intense fire. In its quest for gender neutrality, the draft policies seek to inspire unisex toilets and changing rooms as well as individual shops. It also suggests the abolishment of gender-specific pronouns and gender-neutral uniforms. Is this a rights or safety issue? And why the proposal?
In a country such as ours, where we're still having, where we are actually the rape capital of the world, we're still having an issue in our schools where teachers are sleeping with students in primary schools and higher schools. We are currently still having issues around safe infrastructure for our children to go and study in public schools mostly. And we also have an issue around the quality of education. Priorities are a bit twisted because that's what should be invested in. That's how we should be investing in our young people.
You will never have majority of parents who will say, we agree with these people. Let us not confuse our children. Right. Children, when they grow up, even before you teach them, a boy knows that is a boy. A girl knows that is a girl. So rather than focusing on helping these children who are being confused by what some people are saying, let them get counseling and they be helped. Because if they want to use boys' toilets, nobody's going to stop them.
What are the experiences of young learners who are of different sexual orientation before the proposal?
I don't really identify as like a male or a guy. I prefer sort of like, I sometimes like mix, like sometimes I'm feeling more feminine, sometimes I'm feeling more masculine, but normally it's not like one or the other, it's like in the middle.
If a student feels more comfortable going to school wearing a skirt, wearing pants, being addressed by this name rather than that, using these pronouns instead of those pronouns, it is within the school's best interest to help facilitate a system and a community and a society to help the students feel more comfortable.
The Department of Basic Education says it is a way to expand choice. One major debate, however, is about the safety of learners in school in a country that is on the rise of gender-based violence.
So LDDA believes that, individuals sometimes identify with a gender that differs from their biological sex. So we could not actually dictate and say, this is what you need to believe, but we need to give them that choice and we need to provide, access.
In line with our constitution, and more than anything, the Basic Education Department has been consistent in its attempt to create safe spaces for learners who are gender diverse.
Invest in educating people. Before you can go and open a unisex toilet, let people understand why they have to have unisex toilets. Help people understand why it's necessary for them to embrace people who use other, who like boys must embrace girls using the same toilets, and what the rules there are.
Many say plans to implement these will fundamentally change the school environment, with more spotlight on the rights of the LGBTQI+ community in South Africa. Ni Omani, reporting for News Central.
Very interesting indeed. Joining us now in this conversation this evening is an intersectional human rights advocate from South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us, Loyiso Saliso. Loyiso, thank you once again for joining us on the conversation. Loyiso, can you hear me, please? I think your mic is muted. Could you kindly unmute it? Okay. All right. Well, while we wait for Loyiso to join us and we fix whatever the issue is, like I said, very interesting conversation, to be honest. And if you remember watching that report, there are those who are saying that is this exactly what the basic education sector needs right now? Talking about gender, will I say gender-based toilets or bathrooms? Has the basic education in South Africa gotten so comfortable, and has it reached a certain level where every other issue that they may be having would have been sorted, and the next thing to think about is toilets for mixed genders?
Exactly. So as much as we want to talk about, having equal rights, being gender neutral in the country, South Africa, who has since embraced gender neutrality laws, since about last year. But South African schools still have schools who still use pit latrines in public schools. And then we still have, there are reports saying that about 4 out of 10 children, who start grade 1 do not finish up to grade 12. So they have, numerous challenges facing basic education in that country that is still yet to get, the attention of this body. And then the next thing you want to think about is building toilets for gender neutral people who do not identify either as male or female. So as much as we want to make them comfortable because this is what they identify as, there are other challenges that are yet to be solved. So what do you think about these public schools who do not have access to good toilet system, and they used to use pit latrine in 2022, and then you want to build toilets for people who do not identify as either of the genders?
Okay. Well, we have Loyiso back with us, I believe. Loyiso, thank you for joining us. Before we begin to dissect the conversation, I think we would like to throw it to you. Now, we have been talking already about priorities here. Is this the right time to talk about this? Please join us in this conversation. How did the education department come up with this particular point? Is this what is most pressing at the time?
Okay, I hope I'm audible right now.
Very, yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me again. So, first of all, I want to say and be very clear on the fact that it is very good to be progressive as a country. To be progressive in the sense that we want to abide by our constitution, where we allow everybody in our diversity to be free and liberated in our country. And yes, I'm definitely pro unisex toilets. However, we need to be realistic about the society that we are living in. In the communities in where we have majority public schools, which are the rural, or let me rather say the non-white communities, this is going to be a challenge. I feel like our government is once again being reactionary, and they are once again dealing with the issue on a surface angle rather than dealing with the roots. We are living in a country where we have struggles around the infrastructure of schools in our rural areas, our rural areas, in our township schools, in our colored schools, where the schools are not safe for the children, where there are still children in 2022 who are using pit toilets. There are still children who are having classes under trees, where we're having a serious crisis of bullying in our schools. We find children as young as 10 years old, 11 years old committing suicide because they are being bullied for who they are, for being different from other people. We're having an issue of rape. I mean, not so long ago, there was a case where a group of young people in primary school had raped a young girl in the school toilets, and these are young boys in primary school. So really, as much as it's a good thing for us to be progressive, but we have to be realistic about the society that we are living in, and it's not going to be safe. Our government needs to invest in these more important things, especially quality education as well, to ensure that our children's future is safe. And then we can also then focus, but then also, yes, we have to educate society. I noticed that in your clip, you interviewed 2 white kids around this issue of gender non-conforming people. And I have to mention that in this country, white people or white population is the minority and majority is Black people. And that's where majority public schools are. And so it would have been really wonderful to actually hear the views of children and parents and teachers and even SGBs of these schools where our children go to see if this is actually going to be feasible. But where I'm coming from right now, being a citizen in this country, being an advocate and an intersectional one, understanding these issues from the various angles, it is going to rather create more cases on the things that our government has not tackled yet.
All right, so talking about that, when you say that the white communities are in minority, and I also think that, when you're building unisex toilets now, you're probably heading to the cause or, trying to get the right of this minority who, as it is seen in the clip that we just saw, that it looks like they have the issue of the gender neutrality more than the Black community. So should we say that the government is, trying to prioritize the right of the minority in that region more than the Blacks who still have, poor infrastructure in the schools?
So the reality is that non-binary people are all races, right? That's the fact. However, in this instance, we live in the most unequal society in the world, South Africa. And so our government right now wants to tackle this particular matter in a blanketed manner. And you can't address social issues in our country on a blanketed manner, because even if they do have unisex toilets in schools, in public schools that are located in suburbs and in privileged areas, but then also it's going to create another question around inequality, around who do you prioritize? What about gender non-conforming children in townships and in villages and so forth? How do you accommodate them? So it's really something that they should think about, that they need to debate, and not just want to invest money and just do it right away, because it does seem like it's a call from the more privileged society, if we're going to be honest about this conversation. With our side of things, in our schools, in our communities, they still need to go out there and educate our people. We have lesbians being what they call corrective raped every single day in our communities because they are lesbians. And that means that obviously highlights the fact that people still don't understand that queer bodies, GNC folk, trans bodies, they have as much rights as heterosexuals. And so if you're going to take that and still want to divide it into a racial matter, it doesn't make things better, it makes it worse. You can't accommodate and make safe spaces for certain racial non-binary people and not do it for our kids in our communities.
That's quite interesting. You're painting a clearer picture now, explaining that there needs to be more enlightenment when it comes to the gender balance, and that probably should have been. It's more like the cart is being placed before the horse now. Permit me for using that line. But then, to simplify, for parents and communities out there watching this conversation that we're having, what's the proposal really saying when it comes to non-gender specific pronouns? Could you paint us a clear picture, please?
Okay, so I think around the pronouns matter is not really much of a big thing, because it's really how people want to be referenced to. For example, heterosexual men do not want to be called her or she, and that's their right. That's what they want. That's the pronouns that they want. So that is something that we need to respect. I think it's something that can be done and not take so long, even though, once again, you still go into our communities and you will find people asking, why must they be there? Why must they be there? In majority of the country, people still don't understand the there and the they. They still want to mock it. And so I think that it's a thing that can be done. It's doable. there is no harm to it, because it's also part of what I'm saying, that our government needs to educate society. So starting with the pronouns is a way of educating society, that this is why you need to refer to them as they and them, or why this boy or this male looking person wants to be referred to as she and her. That's part of the educating process. So that's not much of a big deal. The unisex uniform as well was one of the things on the proposal. That is also something that can be worked on. We know that, yes, already in our country, we have girls in schools, public schools, that are allowed to wear pants. It happened because of during winter. In some schools, it happened because some girls were wearing short skirts, so they were policing them and saying they need to wear pants more often. It was different reasons. So, but then we have gender non-conforming people who have male bodies that want to wear skirts to school. There we need to educate people, because already we have people in our schools. Our kids are being bullied. Like I said, we have a bullying issue, and gay kids and lesbian kids, and I'll speak about gay specifically, are always the ones who are victimized and bullied until they commit suicide because they are different. So imagine if this a feminine identifying boy or gender non-conforming person comes to school wearing a skirt in a school which majority of people who are not educated as to why they're wearing that, how that's going to fuel the fire of bullying. So we need to really look at these things and not just look into just implementing it because we want to make a certain number of people from a certain society or certain areas of privilege happy with implementing it, but we need to look at it holistically and focus on the fact that we don't live in an equal society. Both in knowledge and in infrastructure.
Loyiso, thank you so much for your submission. Please, we'll have to take a pause there, and then we have our correspondent, Dapo Adigboye, on the other side. Is on standby to share with us what the social media users think about this. Dapo, what do you have for us?
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Shewa. Thank you, Benard. And of course, this is a really burning issue. We decided to take it to social media, particularly Twitter, and this is what we found, right? We put a vote out there, and as you can see on your screen, people's reaction. The yes had just 2% in support of this particular policy. The no's got 86%, and while those that were indifferent got about just 12% of the entire vote. And of course, that tells you exactly the mind of the people on this particular one, on social media, that is. But, you know, going forward, we decided to pick also the reactions, specific reactions of people in terms of comments. And so we have here at Betiana underscore, that's LIH, and she said, I understand having gender pronouns and all, but can we not force it down the throats of the young people? Let boys be boys and let girls be girls, maintaining their individual spaces. That's our opinion on this. Also, we have another a tweet here by @trust underscore Roy, and it says, can these people just stop trying so hard to be white? Really? Wow. Also, we have another tweet here at, of course, A_C_D_P, a mouthful. And he said, according to him, I agree that unisex bathrooms are a bad idea. I remember how disgusting the boys' toilets were and how much cleaner the girls were. I also think if there are children who don't feel comfortable either using boys or girls, an alternative arrangement must be made, you know, if practicable. So that's, of course, some of the reactions on this particular topic.
All right, Dapo, thank you so much. Loyiso, well, of course, social media, what can I say now? We get different reactions from social media, definitely. And these reactions are not just from South Africa, definitely. We got them from, you know, all around, basically. We just opened our Twitter handles for the polls and the comments. Thank you once again, Dapo. Loyiso, coming back to you now, while this debate raises on the issue of rights for transgender, non-binary, and people who identify as unsafe because they are not, you know, catered for when it comes to bathrooms and the rest that's ongoing, what do you propose should be done at this particular point? Because clearly, there still are those who do not feel comfortable with this new suggestion, or should I call it new idea?
Okay, so first of all, I want to respond to the poll, and I know that it's like people from all over, but also sometimes when we don't understand something, we tend to vote according to our understanding. So for me, I read it as a reflection of people also not really understanding this whole sexuality and non-binary matter, right? Secondly, I think that one, as I said, the education needs to happen. Society needs to be educated. Let's get one thing straight, right? People who identify as a certain sexuality or non-sexuality or non-gender, they are not being forced to do that. It's not a choice to wake up one morning and decide to be a key population or decide to be a vulnerable group. I don't think that there are boys with all these patriarchal privileges who would wake up one day and decide to give up these patriarchal privileges to transition to being women so they can be victimized like women are victimized in our society. So it's not a choice thing. It's also not a race thing. People are born this way. And unfortunately, people want to believe that they are forced. They're not forced. There's always been queer bodies, GNC bodies, and trans bodies in society for longer than all of us have been alive currently today. So let's also understand that. However, I think the education still has to happen because, especially on our continent in Africa, we are not very much accepting of this. There are religious influences as well, according to religion, that really are saying we don't tolerate this. It's non-Christian, it's non-Jesus-like, and all of that stuff. We need to start going into society, making them understand that we can't throw away our children because they are different to what society has deemed normal, right? We cannot go around and discriminate against other people as if the constitution of our countries don't apply to them because they also have the same constitutional rights that we have. It's going to be gradual. We have a lot of work to do as a continent in so many things. And this is like one of the things that is really big, that's going to really take time for.
All right, so Loyiso, I have a question. So when we talk about these unisex toilets, is it open to, even people who identify as girls or as boys? Because looking at it, if we have a general toilet for both boys, girls, and then people who are gender neutral, in a case where you just mentioned it, that we have a high rape case, even for those who identify as lesbians, and then there are reports that said about over 90,000 girls between the age of 10 to 19 gave birth from March 2021 to April 2022. If you are given, I know that they can actually still, relate outside the toilet, but if toilet is actually a confined space, and then if you are giving them the freedom for a boy and a girl to use the same toilet, are you not giving them, this medium to actually have the privacy and then exposed to a number of dangers, gender-based violence, if you're using the same toilet?
Okay, so in our society, yes, it does cause a high risk for them to be violated. I must say, though, that, for example, where I'm at right now, the toilets here are unisex, and I'm with adults, right? And even we were having this conversation today, and there were some adults in my group who were saying that even for me, when I walk into the bathrooms and I walk past the man, I feel like I'm in the wrong space or I'm in the wrong toilet. And it makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. And so I'm sure that even for children, it would be the case whereby when they walk into a certain toilet, that they walk past guys, they walk past boys, and they're using the same bathrooms, it's going to be a problem. Hygienically as well, we need to also have a look at that. How is it going to work hygienically? But we do know that it's going to cause problems if we take it to school levels, and depending on which communities. We're going to see increases in violations. We're going to see increases in bullying of children. I think that's the view for me. So right now, even if they do build separate toilets for gender non-conforming people, it's going to again bring an issue of why then are you isolating them? But I don't think it would be an isolation thing if we already have separate toilets that say these are for boys, these are for girls, and these are for gender non-conforming people. I think we need to look at safety, considering the society that we live in, and not look at it as a means of discrimination or going back to the apartheid era where it was like blacks this side and whites this side, but rather a matter of ensuring that those who utilize those toilets are actually safe as well.
All right, Loyiso, thank you so much for wading into this particular matter. Clearly, there is more education that needs to be passed on concerning, gender in South Africa, around the world, basically. And then there's still more that should be thought about before this particular project is embarked upon. We do hope that it eventually will be safe when it is implemented and that everything will go smoothly. Once again, thank you so much, Loyiso, for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you, Loyiso.
Thank you very much.
All right. So clearly, there's still more to be done concerning this issue. Just before we go on to the next topic, what Loyiso has made clear right now is it seems not everything has been clearly thought out just yet.
I have my reservations for that because many times when we talk about this gender rights, and then as much as we want to, prioritize, we make these people feel comfortable, the LGBT community. But it looks as though they are beginning to erase the rights of people who identify as either a girl or a boy. Because if you want me to tolerate and accept these people, but please do not do that at the expense of my own rights. Because do not force me to be in them, to do some certain things. Do not force some content to my face. I am not against, their existence, but do not force them on me. Like the tweet said, that do not force these things down the throat. You're already forcing it down the throat of the adults. Now it's going to the children. And we know that African culture have their own reservations for this set of people.
Very true. Well, let's hope that everything, like I said, is clearly thought out and that while trying to protect some people's rights, you don't infringe on other people's rights. All right, it's time to go on a quick break. When we come back, we are still staying in the Rainbow Nation, talking about South Africa, but this time we're moving away from gender-based conversations to something that spilled over from the apartheid era. Do stay with us.
Welcome back. You're still watching Report Desk Africa on News Central Television. And then if you're just joining the show, you just missed the first half of the show where we were just talking about the gender-neutral laws that was introduced in basic education in South Africa. And then the reaction it has been getting from the online space and also from political parties and civil society groups in South Africa. So still staying in South Africa, but away from education, more than 150 victims of apartheid have been sleeping outside the Constitutional Court in Johannesburg, demanding reparations for crimes committed during the apartheid era. Now, many of them say they have been overlooked in the reparations process managed through the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, while others want more than the 30,000 rands they were awarded. Now, News Central captured their requests and agitations in this report.
As we are sitting here, we are a wounded society. We've got bullets in our bodies. We've been raped by the apartheid soldiers.
This group of elderly men and women say after more than 38 years, they are done begging the government. Now they demand that President Cyril Ramaphosa and Justice Minister Ronald Ramula come and address them.
The RC recommended the reparation, whereby in that recommendation, they promise us to repay each individual victim a financial help, an educational help, proper medication help, and a proper housing.
For 4 weeks now, 60-year-old Victoria Tukana has been enduring cold and rainy nights outside the Constitutional Hill in Johannesburg. Like her peers alike, she wants reparation payments. Tukana recalls how she was shot in 1982, leading to her losing her unborn baby. She says she constantly has back pains and wants the government to pay her medical bills and other reparations. These men and women are members of the Galela Campaign and Kulumani Support Group, which was set up to represent more than 100,000 victims of apartheid crimes and their families. Some of them still have visible injuries and bullets in their bodies. Others lost loved ones.
It's about 31 days now we are sleeping outside at the Concord in the national court, where we think that they can help us to get our reparation.
In 2003, a list of victims of gross human rights violations was drawn up, and according to the Department of Justice, more than 17,000 people received a once-off payment of 30,000 rands. However, the victims say the money is not enough. Judy Saidman, Kulumani Galena Campaign Board member, says the government must honor the constitutional commitment to the victims in order to restore their dignity. In 1995, the government of South Africa established a presidential fund through the Truth and Reconciliation Committee to help the victims, but not many here received the funds.
Many of the victims here are saying they have had enough. They have spoken to the government, but the government has not done anything. And they are saying they will not move an inch here until they listen to the Bogani Siziba constitutional bill in Johannesburg. For News Central TV.
Quite a story there. Now, to discuss this, we have our South African correspondent, Bonang Siziba, who took charge of that report. Bonang, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Bongani, I beg your pardon, Bongani. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good to see you, Benard, and your colleague.
Okay, Shewa.
My name is Adesewa. Thank you, Bogani, for joining us.
Thank you, Bongani. All right, now Bongani, I want to jump straight into this. Now, one of the victims you spoke to there, who had scars on the top of her head, said she remembers, the trauma that she faced from 1982. Now, from 1982 to 2022, that's about 40 long years. Now, the story of apartheid is one that the rest of Africa, probably the whole world, remembers, quite well, as long as we can go down history lane. It's a long-standing issue. Could you kindly help us understand the situation here? Because according to the South African government, most of the complaints that these victims have been taken care of. That all what they feel obliged to have been answered. So, what exactly is the story behind these people sleeping outside of the court?
Yeah, Benard, it's quite a sad story because I was there at the Constitutional Court yesterday. And as I'm speaking to you now, it's raining heavily in Johannesburg. And I'm just thinking, how are they? Because they are sleeping outside. And apartheid issue here in South Africa, it's one of the things that many South Africans, you find out that many South Africans are still wounded because of the apartheid era. And speaking about the elderly women and men that I saw yesterday, some of them, they were showing me the gun wounds. Some of them were showing me what happened to them. They were talking to me. I had to sit down and even listen to their stories, quite sad stories. And especially that woman that you were speaking about, who was shot at in 1982, and she still remembers those memories vividly, and it's quite sad. And also, they were telling me that the government said they have done enough. They have given the money to those that they put their application claims across. But those who didn't claim, the government doesn't have money anymore to pay them. So they are just there waiting for the government, and they are saying that they need President Cyril Ramaphosa or Justice Minister Lamula to come and address them. But it seems it's not going to happen soon because it's been 4 weeks now they've been sleeping outside, and the government hasn't done anything.
All right, looking at some of the demands of these victims, many of them, we know that back then, as of 1995, many of them were given 30,000 rand. And then when you calculate, includes, taking cognizance of the inflation that has run through this period of times, the money is now, running up to like over 100 million rands now. Do you think that they would still want to be paid 30,000 rands? Or do you think the government would want to consider the inflationary pressures that have run through these times and then giving them, is the government capable of paying these people the exact equivalent, looking at the value?
The government of South Africa is having its own troubles. We can see Eskom now. I'm even in the dark because of Eskom. There is no money. So looking at this and saying the government is going to pay them more than 30,000 or even pay them. Let's not talk about paying them about 30,000 rands because the government is not coming forth, which means they don't have the money. And these people are now not demanding the 30,000. Some of them that I spoke to, they were saying they want up to 15 million to be paid such kind of money. And the South African government doesn't have money. And I think for the government not even to come to the table is because they don't have the funds to pay these victims. And also, we know that some of them were paid 30,000, which is almost about 1,000 US dollars. And looking at it now with inflation and how things are going, it's nothing, it's not much that they can say they can use it. Some of them they need for medical purposes, education of their children. And also some of them, they say they need counseling. They never got any counseling since at that time, and they are still troubled souls. So I don't think the money will be enough, 30,000, and also that the government will come to the table and pay them what they are demanding.
Now, Bogani, you talked about healthcare just now, and that's what I want to bring to the table at the moment. We saw some of the victims there with scars, and you also mentioned in your report some had bullet wounds. What has the government been doing, or what is the government doing about their medical care at the moment? Because 30,000 rand, those who collected that amount of money back then, by now clearly would have made use of all of the money. Do they still receive medical care from the government?
According to them, they are not receiving anything now. Actually, among them, there was a blind woman who told me that she was shot at close to her left eye, and now she is blind because of that. And she also put up her application, but it was rejected. So since then, she has not got any medical treatment or any help from the government. And she's not the only one. There were some also that I saw, like I indicated earlier, that I saw some scars. I saw wounds. One elderly woman had to show me that he still has a bullet in his back. And he doesn't have money to go to the hospital so that that bullet can be taken out. And looking at it, that this thing happened more than 20 years ago, which means the money, if he was given the money was not enough for him to take himself to the hospital. And maybe now they have children that they need to cater for. So the money they don't have now, and they don't have money for medical bills. So it's quite such a dire situation there. And these victims, what they need is not only money, but also justice. Some of them, they say that the perpetrators never came to them and even asked for forgiveness. So it's some of the things that they are saying the government should look at that so that they bring those people who violated their human rights. Some of them were raped. But for them to get closure, they need the government to bring those people so that they can sit down and speak to one another. If it's forgiveness, they ask for forgiveness so that these victims also can find closure. So it's not only about their medical, their health side, but also mentally they are not well.
All right, looking at it now, when we want to date back to when the apartheid regime, many of them got these attacks about 40 to 20 years ago, like you rightly said. Have we seen a protest like this one in the last 40 years? And why are they coming out now? Is there something that is behind this? What is the driving force behind why are they coming now?
They feel like they have been ignored by the government. And it's not the first time that we have seen them coming out and asking the government to speak to them, asking the government to listen to them. They have been coming out earlier this year in April. They also came out, they were at the Constitutional Court, also putting out their grievances. And then the minister then came to them and spoke to them that he will come back to them. So for them to come back again, which means the government is ignoring them. So this is not the first time that we have seen them coming out and putting out their grievances and asking the government to look at their grievances and help them. So it's like
Seems we lost communication with Bogani there. I was going to throw one personal question at Bogani before we lost contact with her. Now, I was going to ask her if she actually witnessed the apartheid regime and what kind of memories she had. I know that it's been quite a traumatic experience for many of those who actually did go through the apartheid regime. I remember being very young at that particular time, and almost every song that came out of South Africa were freedom fighting songs. Bogani, do we have you back? I think we have her back.
Yes. Sorry about that. My network is a bit shaky.
Oh, okay. It happens here too, so don't worry about it. Anyway, Bogani, I was going to throw this question to you just before we let you go, and we have just about 2 minutes. Did you witness the apartheid era?
No, I was too young. I even remember some of the things. But what I remember at school, I think I was very young. Then we used to sing songs about the apartheid, and we didn't know exactly what was it. But what I really remember is that many African countries came through for us. Many African countries, I remember they used to donate money for us and saying, this is the apartheid money, South Africa, this and that. But we didn't know much about what was going on.
Anyway, that's where I was going to ask, and if actually you did witness it, I was going to ask what the feelings were. But apparently, like you said, you were too young. It's giving me the chance to guess your age anyway. But thank you so much, Bogani. Thank you for joining us. We do hope eventually that these victims would get some kind of a respite or restitution, basically, and that the government will listen to their cry and their aid. Once again, thank you for joining us on the show as always.
Thank you both.
All right. Apparently, there are people all over the world, not just in South Africa, everywhere, who for one reason or the other are seeking the face of the government, particularly those who have suffered some kind of injustice in one way or the other. And the United Nations even has a specific day, I can't remember the date now, for people who are seeking restitution from governments of different parts or different countries. So
I think the question we should ask is why does it have to take protests like this one and agitations like this one before you hear a response? And sometimes you may never even get a response from the government. These people were affected 40 years ago. 40 years is such a long time. And then you don't have to wait for them to, come out now, to demand for these things before you get a response from them. Imagine having to live with the memories of being shot. Some of them still live with the bullets under their skin.
Definitely.
For 40 years.
For 40 long years.
I don't think it is an African thing, like you rightly said. It is getting the recognition of the United Nations, so it's a global problem.
It is a global phenomenon eventually. And then, the government don't need to wait, or governments of different parts of the world, case in point here, South Africa, doesn't need to wait for people to protest, like you clearly stated, before they can make their voices heard. We do hope that they get what they need and what they are demanding for eventually. We'll take one final break, a very quick one, and when we come back, we'll be joined by our very own Bettina Nweli, who will be taking us through the forecast for the coming week. Do stay with us.
All right, you're welcome back. You still report Desk Africa on News Central Television, and if you're just tuning in, you've missed almost the entire part of the show. And then let's take a recap. First, we discussed the gender-neutral laws that has been introduced in South African schools, and also staying in South Africa, we looked at some of the victims of the apartheid. And now we'll be going straight to the forecast segment with Bettina Nweli. Hello, Bettina.
Hi, Shewa. Thank you so much for having me. Well, the crystal ball is now a crystal screen.
I was going to say that. A very big crystal screen.
Yes, and we'll be starting this forecast from Egypt, where the climate adaptation in Africa, the European Union, and 4 member countries have pledged €1 billion to combat climate change in Africa. Now, these 4 member countries are France, Germany, Netherlands, and Denmark. So we look forward to that story. And the European Union has also promised that they will be providing €60 million for loss and damage of negotiations. Now from Egypt, we'll move on into Uganda, where they're still battling with the Ebola outbreak, and staff are very reluctant to work for fear of catching the deadly hemorrhagic fever, and also because of exhaustion and delayed wages. I'm sure some people can relate with this, even though the World Health Organization and aid groups are providing assistance, and the United States says it has channeled $22 million through local partners. And last but not the least, we'll be celebrating men worldwide, not just in Africa, as we'll be looking at the International Men's Day. Now, this is a global holiday that's celebrated annually on November the 19th to recognize and celebrate the cultural, political, socio-economic achievements of men. Happy International Men's Day, Benard, in advance. The theme for this year will be helping men and boy. Very interesting, I must say.
Very, very interesting. I was going to say, on behalf of the men on the show, Ni and Dakbo, we will be expecting gifts from you all. Talking about Shewa and Bettina, and blessings if she's watching as well. We certainly will be expecting gifts from you all.
Happy International Men's Day in advance. Finally, it is celebrate your gender.
Thank you very much. But very quickly, as we wrap up, Bettina, also I'm taking particular interest in the very first forecast story you talked about, and that's the amount of money being given to African countries for climate change and what has been going on so far. In COP26, we did see some money being pledged, and now COP27 we're seeing again. We do hope that these countries get this money first of all, but most importantly, that these monies are used for what they are meant for eventually.
I totally agree with that, Benard.
All right. Thank you so much, Bettina, for joining us as always. And please don't forget International Men's Day.
Okay.
All right. And that has been the show. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Report Desk Africa. Like we call it RDA here. We do hope that this has been entertaining and has also been informative. My name, as always, is Benard Akede. We hope to see you again, same station, same time next week.
Bye.